some thoughts with us. She's a design thinker and innovative problem solver, and her career, similar to that of many women, has taken a non-traditional route through uncharted territory. She has a bachelor's degree in landscape architecture and has worked to devise strategies to overcome barriers to sustainability. And her strategies have been shared around the West and on the TEDx stage. So today she's talking about design your destination. As you can see on the screen, strategies for a more fulfilling journey. So we're very excited to welcome Cynthia and all of you today. And I will turn it over to Cynthia.
Thank you. Okay, let's make sure that I'm doing this right. There we go. Advance the screen. We did it. Okay, so there you go. That's my contact information if anybody needs it for whatever reason. So I am a sustainable landscapes expert. As she said, I graduated from Utah State in landscape architecture. But my real career, the one that I would be more known for, didn't start till I was 37. So as we say, life can take, unusual paths, and no matter what path you're on right now and what stage you are at in your career, it's never too late. There's always opportunity to grow and move forward. And I'm going to show you different strategies along the way to gain the skills and to be ready for those opportunities. And more importantly, to learn how to make them happen. So I want to share the most important the most important skills in my arsenal I gained in the most untraditional way possible. My most valuable skills were skills that I picked up during the 10 years I was a stay-at-home mom. And I'm very fortunate to be from a generation of women where you could choose that. But also in our generation, it was one or the other. There weren't a lot of flexible work options, and there weren't other ways to stay engaged. And so you were either all in or all out. And it was really difficult. And so my sister and I were both at-home moms, and we didn't want to lose our career. We both had about 5 years into our careers at that point, and we didn't want to lose our skills and have those skills just disappear, which was a mistake that a lot of people make when they're taking some time off or taking a break. There are still opportunities, and in fact, there are better opportunities to gain really valuable skills, because I will tell you straight up, no one, well, I shouldn't say ever, but almost never is ever going to pay you to do the really cool stuff. The really neat things are things you're going to come up with all on your own, that you are going to go for and try and do. And they can be small, they can be big, but just know that generally speaking, nobody pays us to do the really cool stuff. That's up to us to find ways to engage that way. So along those lines, I want to show you where we learned that. This is my personal lifelong motto. And I'm about to show you why. All big things in this world are accomplished by people who are naive and have an idea that is obviously impossible. And I think this is why we get so fascinated with young people and the possibility that they represent, and especially those of you that are associated with the university, you see it all the time. They don't know what isn't possible, and so they do impossible things. I'm about to show you my first major project, and I would never take a project like that on now, because now I know it's not possible. At 31, as a mom of young kids, I had 3-year-old twins and a 8-month-old baby when I started this project. I didn't know that it couldn't be done. And because we just naively didn't know that, we made something really impossible happen. And so this was the Wild West Jordan Playground Project. Now, some of you might be familiar with a similar project. I don't know if that's a video or not. Some of you might be familiar with a similar project in Utah County in Pleasant Grove. And that was kind of what inspired us to get involved with this. This project became the largest playground in the state of Utah. And it was not something that was possible. And in fact, I think some of the people that said, yeah, go for it, literally thought we were going to flop, and that's why they were cool with it. It shouldn't have been possible. This was, now keep in mind, these are $2,005. So I'm a stay-at-home mom with little kids, as was my sister at the time. Her background, she graduated from BYU in public relations and political science. And so we didn't, we both had a little bit of career experience and wanted to keep something going. So we just decided that this was doable. We lived in a rapid growth community that couldn't afford amenities for kids, and we wanted more opportunities for our kids. Growing up, we played in Murray Park, and at the time they had an amazing, totally unsafe playground as I look back on it. But as a kid, it was a tremendous adventure. And so we decided we wanted to make something similar for our community. And the only way that was going to happen is if we made it happen. And so with this kind of crazy idea, we reached out, we raised $425,000, $2,005, created 9 subcommittees with 50 volunteers, and we got 6,000 people to build the biggest playground in the state of Utah in 10 days. It involved more than 100 local businesses. And by the end of the project, at the beginning of the project, everyone thought we were absolutely freaking crazy, and they were not wrong. And by the end of the project, we had businesses like oil companies literally fighting over who got to come and fill all of our heavy equipment for free. And so how do you do something like that? How do you create that kind of excitement and momentum? And so that was what we learned. So, it kind of started out with absolutely zero. We had nothing. And one of the reasons that I think this is important is we think that if someone just gave me an opportunity, or if I could just find the right opportunity, or if I had the resources to make an opportunity. You guys, we had nothing. I didn't even have time because I had 3 little kids. We had absolutely nothing, no people, no money, no power, no support. Most people thought it was crazy. And that was the starting point. But we decided that you just have to find that core group of people to believe, and that group of people that believe in you. And in my case, my sister, who's been my lifelong bestie, we decided it was possible. And because we absolutely believed it, we got other crazy people to believe it. And that crazy group of people grew into more and more people until it generated unstoppable momentum. We learned a lot, and we'll talk a little bit about this off and on through the presentation. This was the first day. Or one of the first days, and you can see it was like a total slog fest full of mud. This is Melissa Johnson. She was just a stay-at-home mom when she started on this project. She later became the mayor of West Jordan for a period of time. And this is right before she went down thigh deep into a hole full of water in 32 degrees. It was awesome. And this was in May. We just had a cold snap that hit because, of course, that's exactly what's going to happen. But to get to that point, we had a group of core volunteers that were working anywhere from 5 to 40 hours a week over the 12 to 18-month period. And imagine that. Imagine getting people to come and do all of this for free. But that's what happened. And then we got all of our different community people to give at least 4 hours to make it happen. And that happened because a point we're going to talk a little bit later, that we all want to be part of something that matters. We want purpose, we want belief, we want to be engaged and involved. That's why we have sports teams we love. It's why we engage in religion. It's why we engage in so many different things, is to be part of that group doing bigger things than ourselves, and to kind of create that. So, how it went. I mean, we made this thing happen. Some of you may have actually seen this playground. It's actually now been demolished and rebuilt into something new. But for a period of 20 or so years, we made that happen. And in fact, we went from nobody believing in it to, on one of the days, we actually had to close the site because we had so many volunteers coming to do a shift that we couldn't handle all of them, and we had to close it down. And it just became this whole, community-wide dream. And we were just, we marketed as such. I mean, granted, you heard, I have a landscape architecture background, and I had worked for a parks department. My sister had a political science PR background, but that is not how we marketed this. We pushed this out there as these are soccer moms and dads and grandparents. And that's truly who everybody, once we came together, that's who we all were, because that's who we were representing, not whatever career we had or whatever skill set we had. And often we found if you were a accountant in your day job, that is not what you wanted to do on this project. You wanted to get away from the accounting and do something more interesting. That ultimately ended up not being so exciting. I wish we had accountants that were a little more excited about accounting, but we'll get into that too. We had thousands that came to the grand opening. It was this really big deal. I nearly had a nervous breakdown by the end. It was really, really stressful, and I would never recommend it. But we accomplished something that no one had done. Now think about this. This was in the days before social media. So the only way we got those 18 elementary school families, families from all 18 elementary schools, was to show up at back to school nights in person. Ultimately, I ended up being glad we didn't have social media because it would have made it both easier and harder. But that was so. This is a project that I wasn't paid to do, that no one made me do, that just was a way to keep my skills going and to engage in my community and to make something great that I could be proud of with my, for my children and for everybody else's. And it made ways for lots of people to do that. And the reason that I share this project is these lessons were a lot of hard way, but it's things that I learned there I could never have learned on a job. The amount of time that it took to pull this off and the number of people and everything else would never have penciled out financially if this were a paid project. It would have certainly gone smoother and it would have been easier and accomplished more affordably, but it wouldn't have been an event that is still talked about even 20 years later. But it was because we did it this hard way. But from that, I gained some really great skills that I have been able to take into my career since. And this project, what I learned working for free in a way I didn't have to, is what formed the foundational skills that I have built the entire rest of my career on. I would never have had the career trajectory I've had if I had not done this weird, strange, out of the ordinary thing. And all of us can see these little things, and don't do anything this big, please. It doesn't need to be this big to be effective, but it just shows you, what can be accomplished. And this is where we thought it ended. And so I would love to have the story end right here. And you guys can all be like, woohoo, look at that. This is so great. We got it on the news like 26 times back in the day when everybody watched the regular news. And this is where we thought the project ended, but it did not. This is where it ended. 3 months later, I was doing a little, why haven't we finished the last of the bills? That should have been paid by now. And that is where I discovered some irregularities from the financial manager of the project. And those little irregularities got into a lot more awkwardness. And let me just say that this was my first lesson in PR, because when someone steals from you, they're not the person that gets to talk to the media. If you're the other name on the bank account, it gets to be you. And so there's a whole story behind how he was able to do it and how we were able to uncover it. And that's more drama than we need in this. Um, it's taken me, the trauma that came from the after, it took longer to clean up the mess that this guy made than it did to do the entire project. And it was extremely painful. So I always say the first project I ever managed resulted in jail time. So if you've managed a project and no jail time has come out of it, congratulations, you already are starting off better than I did. But even through this really painful part, I learned such critical things, and it also helped shape the way forward. It's taken me 20 years to be able to say that the guy that stole this money was not a bad person, but it was opportunity, and granted, there was a whole lot of deception involved, but if I hadn't been so naive, I would have had better processes in place. I would have known a little bit better. Um, I would have been tipped off a little easier about, things that were like, oh, why is he being weird about this? Anyway, there's things that we learn in hindsight. But if I were that person that knew all of those things, I would never have taken something like this on. So you know, it's a here or there. Okay, so let's talk about what can be learned from all of these types of things. Let's talk about how to take lessons that learned there and in other ways and move those forward into careers. So we always hear that the passion is so important, and it's defined as those interests and activities. Pursuits that resonate with us and bring a sense of fulfillment and joy. And possibly the cheesiest advice in all business is to follow your passion. And I would say absolutely don't do that. When you make your passion that the be all end all, and that it's all about that, passion is really about ourselves and what we enjoy and what brings us fulfillment. And that's important. And I don't want to guilt anybody for that. Passion is important, but recognize that it's not necessarily there's avocations and there's vocations, and they're not necessarily the same thing. Your passion is an avocation, and part of why it brings you joy is you get to act on it in whatever ways are important to you or matter to you. Once you start trying to convert that into dollars and cents, you get to lose a lot of that passion. Suddenly it's about doing it in a way that's profitable, or it becomes associated with stress and work and need, and it's no longer that escape or that thing that you enjoy so much. You know, it's something that that can bring a lot of pressure. And so it's okay. Now we want to, you know, do things that we enjoy, of course, but it's okay that if your work is not your passion, um, there's something more important than that, and that is purpose. Purpose has got a much deeper meaning at finding work that matters and that is purpose it, it's creating it. It doesn't matter what you do for a living. If you have a job because there is a purpose for that job being done. And if you literally can find no purpose in your job, you should be worried because you can be fired because there is no reason for that job to exist. But finding meaning within that, the purpose of the work, that is entirely voluntary. And that's something that we bring to it. You know, we've all seen stories in the media about a janitor that goes above and beyond and is beloved in his school or whatever. There's cheesy stories about that everywhere. But the idea is just bringing that with you. And so one of my other all-time favorite quotes is Mike Rowe. And it's you don't follow your passion, you bring it with you. So being passionate about whatever you're doing and whatever you're working on, that is a way of being in the world. And that is something that any of us can do and be and bring. And it is contagious. When we bring that with us, um, then that makes all the difference. You know, we've kind of misled a whole generation into thinking that that passion is something that we find and that it exists outside of ourselves, but it's not. The happiest people are going to keep their passion as their passion, and they don't ruin it by tying your passion to the expectation of others. Focusing on that purpose and why we're doing the thing, that really helps us get through the ugly parts, right? Whether it's our job, our situation in our personal lives, whatever it is, the purpose is where we have the power to get through that slog. And so, you know, whether you're a project manager or a team member who just doesn't want to dread going to work, um, the purpose for projects and tasks is the values that they drive, and that's so important to creating a strong culture. And we all want to go to work. We want to not dread going to work. We want to do work that matters. We want to enjoy as much as we can while we're there, and that's something that we have to cultivate. You know, complaining is a habit, and that doesn't mean that we can't complain or there aren't things to complain about. But if venting and repeatedly venting without working the other angle of that and talking about what you're grateful for, it just changes your perspective and how you see the work you do. All right, let's talk about defining your career compass, tasks versus systems. So it will surprise probably no one to learn I'm ADHD. I was not diagnosed until I was an adult because I did well in school. And so typically back in my era, that wasn't often diagnosed. And so I have a lot of baggage around tasks and systems. And that's one of the reasons that I included this, because even people that are good at it might have some of that same baggage. Of course, James Clear is one of my all-time favorites. And you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. It took me a really long time to understand the difference between these two things. Goals are what we want to accomplish, and they're a hope and they're a dream, but it's having the systems in place that support it that is the difference between success and failure. And so when we go back to that playground project, let me explain the difference. So when we explained what we were trying to do to people, and here's the tagline, that one, you know, the elevator pitch. We are going to create the largest playground in Utah in 10 days using all volunteer help. Okay, that sounds insane. Oh, and we're going to raise all the money, right? That sounds completely insane. But there was a process involved. So we worked with a company called Leathers and Associates. At the time of our project, they had pulled off similar playground builds in 1,800 communities across, well, really the world, mostly the United States, but the world. I think they're up over 3,000 now. So they had a process that was already in place and a system that we could follow that had already been successful before. So, you know, a lot of people that work on the technical side of things will follow Agile as a system for that. There's a whole lot of different, I know UVU offers lots of great classes in this, as I've highly encouraged my kids to get some extra classes on this particular subject, because it really is the difference between success and failure in any career, is understanding how to put a system in place that is right for you as well. You know, in my case, too, there's enough accountability, but I don't want to feel like I'm spending all of my time, check marking things. And so I've had to work through the years and just find the right amount of accountability for me that's not too onerous. And that's the same thing that you'll do. But when you're working on a process, you really want to think about, okay, what's the system? This is our typical project. Um, and we call this is the, anatomy of a project. It's not unique to me. I think we've all recognized this and been through those different stages. You start out really strong and excited, and then at some point you fall into that gulf of misery, and then you're almost done, and then that hope is just kind of snatched away, and then there's more things and more slogging, and it's all much more work than you ever intended. And then at the end, you get to be really proud of what you accomplished because you managed to get through it. How much gulf of misery and slogging and everything else is involved is directly related to the systems that you put in place. So as the example on that playground project, oh, right here. Yeah. You've also got side quests and distractions that happens as well. So in line with that, one of the things that they had is kind of on those side quests in previous builds and improving the system, right? So as Leathers told us, in previous builds, they'd noticed that if people left for a meal, they didn't come back. And so one of the things that we had to end up doing was we had to get meals donated for the volunteers. And so they got a meal as part of their shift. So that's 10 days. That was 20 meals that we also had to get donated in addition to everything else. But if they were served a meal, not only did they stay, but they felt thanked for their time. They had a chance to talk to other people about their experience. It created more of that community feel and that barn raising. So for the extra work involved in providing that meal, we actually created a lot more of what we were trying to create, which was a sense of community. In a large community like West Jordan, that's really hard to come by. It doesn't naturally exist. You kind of have to build it. And so when we removed this fail point, we found that it made a huge difference. But what does that look like, for our team? The other thing we found, and this was a direct result of the systems in place, was that we had to have an on-site daycare for kids ages 2 through 10. Yeah, we provided, I know, this was a different time. We provided on-site daycare for kids so that the families could all come together, and kids over the age of 10 got to actually help on the playground project, moving mulch or doing whatever they could do. And then the younger kids all got to be together in this tent, and we had, obviously we had different folks come and entertain the kids. And again, that came back to creating that community experience. You can see why it was still talked about many years later, and why this was such an impossibly huge project. And so, you tap into talents. So even if you have an imperfect path that's plotted, organizing those talents around people and finding ways for individuals to grow and to improve and to stretch. I mean, through this, I had none of these skills at the beginning. I gained them through sheer desperation. And let me give an example of that. The first bill for the design of this project was not sent to our nonprofit. It was sent from the architects to me personally for $27,000. Oh my gosh, you guys, this is why I say never do this. My husband did not know about that for a few years because he would have freaked out. And I told him, like, oh, you can't bill me. This is the project. And they said, no, we know your nonprofit has no money. This is going to motivate you. And so when we started this project, I said I could do anything but hit people up for money. And by several months into the project, I'm sitting down and looking, corporations in the eye and telling them I need $50,000. And the nerve that developed because of sheer desperation, I would never have chosen that. But I have needed to use that to pull people into all kinds of stuff ever since. And that's where I gained the courage to do that. So just try something when you're scared. Maybe don't put this much pressure on yourself behind it. But that's the way that went down. All right, so let's talk about generating opportunities, both internal and external within the workplace. And that is really key. This is probably the number one rule, right? We want to create that belonging, create places for people to belong, and to create that within our work environments. If we are seen as that positivity bringer and that person that creates opportunities for others, not just always looking for the next one for ourselves, you become a go-to person within your organization. And whatever your job is, that is not a bad place to be. So I get to do really interesting work. And I've had a lot of people tell me, because my job is to teach Utahns how to landscape like we live in Utah, and I get to do all kinds of fun things along those lines. I did work. This is the Conservation Garden Park, and after the playground, I got involved there as on their advisory board, mostly because I knew they already had accountants, and I would never ever have to worry about anyone having to go to jail again, and they would take care of that, and I could just do the parts that didn't involve dealing with those issues. And then I ended up getting hired because I just kind of didn't go away. And at the time, it was very hard to get hired into jobs like this. They didn't really exist. To take this job, I actually took a massive pay cut over what I had been making 10 years before. Again, not the smartest career move in terms of money, but I got to do the most exciting, enjoyable, fun work. And I got to lay foundation for things that are starting to really bear fruit now, even after I'm gone, that I'm really proud of. But where I want to go with this is when people will say, oh, you had my dream job, you worked in a garden, you taught people gardening, and that's so exciting. Um, that's not the job I took. The job I took was low paying admin assistant. And once I got into that job, I was able to look at what isn't getting done. Where are the opportunity points? What are ways we could be better at what we're doing? That's work that isn't being done, and made niches for myself. So when people will tell me that, it's that they want the job I made, it wasn't the job I took. And that is true for most of us. Most of us work in organizations where we can find ways to add value in areas we hope to grow that will eventually lead to that additional opportunity. And so part of the importance of that is building that foundation and those skills. So while you're doing something else, look at that next place you want to be. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying that next job you want to have necessarily within the organization. So I'm not saying look at the person above you and think, what do I need to do to get their job? That's going to backfire on you big time, because those are the exact people that you need to help you get qualified to do that level of work. Instead, you want to look at what aren't we doing that we could be doing that would make this organization more effective if only we, moved in that direction. And then what do I need to do to be ready to fill that role? And then you start seeding those opportunities. So for me, I was like every blog, every 2010 mom, I was a blog mom. So moving into social media was a real natural for me. And so I got to start some of the first social media accounts and some of the first marketing of conservation in the state of Utah. Let's see. There we go. Okay, first off, pretend this is like a really cool team photo and not like an embarrassing stock photo. Um, but your opportunities also come when you look at the people around you and you look for opportunity for them to grow and achieve, and how to push them into their next role or to help them achieve that as well. So it's not just about us. I'm actually following up a cheesy photo with an even more cheesy photo. And that's just trying to get involved in collaborations where that you can be part of developing your team, but also you can learn from those team members as well. And that's one of the reasons you're in a group like this, is to get access to people who, externally as well, that you wouldn't necessarily get access to in the day job. And then you want to find the gaps. So gaps within the organization, gaps within your own skill set. And so those are the things that you're going to need to build and to be able to advance and work your way forward. And so it's not just your own gaps, but where is the organization missing something that could make us better? And how am I the person to bring it? Now, if it's something they're missing and you don't want to do it, then that's where you start looking at the person who might be the right fit. And you just start talking about, opportunities, and maybe they'll see it and maybe they won't. But to me, the biggest place that you can generate opportunity without having to leave your job is to gauge those gaps and find ways to jump into them. And then, are we fixing the right things? Are we solving the real problems? Um, and solve it, for people. And I had some experience, I'll talk about that in just a second, where I had to really look at this really closely. And then we also want to reroute some roadblocks. Some experiences are intended just to show us how the thing cannot get done. Do not be discouraged by those moments. So by way of example, when I first started on the playground project, I remember going in, at the time I was active in the LDS church, and I sat in front of my bishop, and he was trying to give me a calling, and I reversed the process on him. And I said, hey, I'm doing this project and we're going to need volunteers, and I'm going to love to have the ward send volunteers. And the more I talked about the project, his eyes got bigger and bigger, and the incredulity on his face. And I remember very distinctly thinking, I could see him shutting down. And I remember very distinctly thinking, oh, That's not how this is going to get done. Right. So I discontinued the conversation. 9 months later, I'm back in his office again, and he pushes a piece of paper at me and he says, "Hey, I just got this from the regional authority. Every stake in West Jordan got this. And it says I need to have 100 people on this playground build on this date." And he looks, and that same look of incredulity is back on his face. He looks at the paper, and then he looks at me and he says, "Is this your project?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "How did you do this?" Right. So in this case, I learned don't start bottom up, start top down. Sometimes bottom up is the right answer. Sometimes top down is. Um, but that's the idea is finding, sometimes knowing, okay, there's just going to be a different way and you're just going to come at it from a different direction. So while I was working at Jordan Valley Water, I had the opportunity to look at why aren't people changing their yards? They know we live in a desert. This was 2014. And everyone thought it's because it's too expensive or it's this or it's that. And through a little bit of research, we discovered is people just didn't know what to do and how to do it. It wasn't that they thought it was horrible. It's just they didn't know what to do. And so through that, I created, through the systems learning that I had previously, I created a system called Localscapes around landscaping. Some of you may have heard of it, some of you may not. Our whole team developed this out. I don't want to take full responsibility. The systems part of it is my baby, and it's based on my design methodology. But we have construction people, and we had other design people, and we had horticulturists that all added the best of what they know to this so that we could create a process that anybody could replicate. And the level of success that the organization has seen since then has gone through the roof because we were solving the real problem. Before, they thought, oh, if we just throw money at people, or, or worse, when you see people like, well, everyone's just too dumb to figure this out. None of that is almost ever true. It's that we haven't introduced the right system that's going to make the things work. In terms of work, of course, there's stages and ages. Sometimes, it's not always the right timing, or we don't always have the right path, but there's almost always a workaround. I highly recommend the book Switch. I love everything by Chip and Dan Heath, but Switch in particular talks about how to change when change is hard. So if you're in this particular thing today because you're thinking about making some career changes or adjustments, I highly recommend this book because it really talks about how to change yourself, how to change the world around you, how to be a positive effector of that, and different strategies that are involved. And so there's my book recommendation for you. And it's also just to recognize right time, right place. So this is me with my little pack of Wolverines. My husband's a Wolverine. My two daughters are as well, both Woodbury Business School Wolverines, one of them currently. And sometimes it's not the right time too. And if you are a parent of young kids, it's okay to not have this as the time to push forward in a career. Or, it might be that you're at the beginning and you don't have those family ties yet and you're able to push a lot harder. That's okay too. I'm at the stage of my career now where I'm like, you know what? I don't really have anything to prove anymore. I'm actually having to let go. Localscapes I just showed you, I spent a year mourning the loss of it when I left it in the hands of very capable 24-year-olds. And they're great, but take everything you've learned in 30 years and hand it over. That's kind of the point of the career I'm at right now that's been really difficult, and that's a different stage. And yet you've created something of value if it has value that extends beyond you being involved with it. And so we should all be striving to give away our jobs. And that can be really hard to do especially when you're passionate, because you put a lot of yourself into it. But it doesn't mean that it shouldn't do that, because it will never achieve what it can if it's only you hanging on to it. Okay, let's just quickly go through connecting versus networking. Networking is about ourselves. It's about, getting out there and meeting people. But connecting is where you're thinking about, how can I, in this group, make opportunity and points of connection for other people? I have that as one of my Strengths Finder 2.0 traits. And so if I know person A and person B don't know each other, but they each have something something that the other might need to know, I can't resist connecting those people. But anyone can do that. That can just be a habit. And it's been surprising to me how often just taking that 30 seconds, that 2 minutes, that quick email introduction between those two people comes back to benefit you later. And even if it doesn't, it just makes you feel good. And that's okay too. My sister took those same skills from the playground project that we had, and she applied them to politics because that's her thing, right? And so she affected a career for someone you may or may not like, but that's why I don't say the name. I just put the picture in there. But she's been with him ever since, writing his books and doing all sorts of things, and it's led to a great deal of opportunity for her because on that project she learned the skills that she needed to make a campaign happen where they actually took out a sitting incumbent, which in the state of Utah is almost impossible. Um, through, for someone that had very low polling at the beginning, and through using those grassroots organizing traits that we learned on that unpaid project, she took another unpaid project and turned it into a career. And so that's really it. So networking is a little bit like passion, it's meeting with other people, but it's also like spreading that joy and spreading those opportunities and making those connections. And that becomes critically important, and just to take that with wherever we go. And then finally, we want to get on this whole motion versus action. So motion is studying. It's there. If I get that one more degree, that'll do it. It's it's making plans and idea boards and Pinterest and whatever the modern equivalent of that is with Instagramming. It's all of the things where we're dreaming and we're thinking about how we would do it. We're writing a plan, and that's fine. We want a certain amount of planning, but there's just no substitute for doing. So do it ugly, do it before you're ready, do it imperfectly. But the best way to make progress quickly is to get the minimum viable idea in motion as soon as you can. Because the more time and effort and planning and perfection you put into something, the less willing you are to learn the lessons that are going to make it succeed as you go along. We get so invested and hung up on our pure original idea that we close ourselves off to things that would improve and change it and help us navigate it forward. So I actually left my job last year, and I am now with Utah Waterways, which is a statewide nonprofit for water conservation. And I did that because it allowed me to solve problems that couldn't be solved within the government sphere. So one of the things is I'm looking at, as Localscapes was picking up, and they had created incentive programs to help offset the cost for people to help this change get in motion, so we can save Great Salt Lake, we can have a water supply that meets the needs of our community. Talk about a job with purpose, right? But one of the challenges is that we're going to need to remove a couple 100 million square feet of lawn in the state of Utah. Not all lawn, but a couple 100 million square feet of the dumb lawn in the next 10 years. And I'm looking at the supply chains that would support that kind of change, and they don't exist. And so in order to make our supply chain more effective, I jumped jobs to Utah Waterways, and that's where I get to work on this plant selector tool, which is coming out next week. Although if you hit that QR code, you can see it now. And this is where we are creating, demand and working on that particular problem. So it's still extending on the problems I used to solve, but into a whole new realm and bringing new people into it. It's going to come out imperfect. And it's taken 3 years to take everything I know and get it down to this level of simple. But we'll learn some lessons. We'll see where we need to adjust it. And I finally just hit the point where we've got to put it out imperfect or we won't put it out at all. And so, there's always going to be detractors when you're trying to do something new or different, or you're trying to extend beyond what is comfortable. Do not let them stop you. With everything that I've done, there's been a lot of doubters. You can tell I'm almost defensive in some ways because I know I'm going to get a lot of pushback that my plants tool is too simple. And it's like, yeah, do you know how hard it was to make it that simple and still make it work and to build a lot of complexity in to happen automatically? But here's what I have found through all these weird things I've been involved with over the years. Detractors are almost always people who want to believe. They want to believe, but they have believed before and they have been burned. And so do not let that make you feel like you can't engage or you can't move forward, or that is an unbreachable barrier. Try to look at your detractors or people that are detracting from the project. Don't look at it as your detractors, taking it personal. That's always a challenge too, especially for me as an ADHDer with, the whole rejection sensitivity thing. But really look at it and understand that it's people that want to believe, but they've just been burned and they can be a little scared. All right, so just some final odds and ends. Grant yourself a little grace. The bigger the goal, the more people are going to think it's dumb. But if you have a system that works, you're basing it on something more than just, I have a random idea. If you have substance underlying it, it's okay. having a lot of people detract from that just means they haven't seen it as an opportunity. So if you have done the research, you have a system in place, try it. Get the minimum viable and try it. And then if it proves unviable, awesome. You tried, you move on. But that's also why don't overinvest. Don't go quit your day job over it. Figure out what's the lowest common denominator way to get this to something testable, and then move forward from there. In the immortal words of Chumbawamba, if you get knocked down, just go ahead and get back up again. I think that's the best quote in the whole presentation. And then, you do learn 10 times more in a crisis than you do in normal times. When I worked on that playground project, it was a series of highs and lows. I got to watch all of these people come in and work together. I got to watch grandparents show their kids the part of the playground they built for them. I got to see all of this amazing stuff. I got to bond with people that I would never have otherwise met, doing something that nobody else thought possible. And then I got to be kind of Lone Ranger at the end, because it does turn out that once things go bad, a lot of those folks move on, and it's not their problem to solve, it's yours. So just know that the leader tends to get more of the credit because the leader is the one holding the bag at the end. And then yeah, and that was, oh, you guys, that was so hard to go through. Okay, it took me 20 years to even be able to talk about it. Okay, so yeah, the meaning of life is to give that purpose and to give it away. You do not have to be paid to do things that are engaging. The most, and there's just that final thought that I would have is that the most valuable skills that I have, this is actually a great book, real quick. And let me just cover this. Sorry, I'll get the last quote in a second, but this is by a friend of mine, Mate, and Yasmina. And this is just great. Like, if your job doesn't allow you the opportunity to gain the skills that you need to move into project leadership, there is no shortage of places you can get it. You can find ways to get that outside of the day job that help build it, that are legitimate. My project was volunteer. I didn't get paid for it, but it was a real world project. It involved real schedules, real money, real people, real materials, real stress. And I was just dumb enough to not get paid. But so, scale that back a little bit. But my point is simply, there are no barriers that you cannot find a way around. You just have to be a little bit creative. And then this is the thought I just want to leave you with, that honestly, this is absolutely true. Every incredible opportunity I have ever had came as a direct result of something I did for free. If you already are in your career and you have expertise, give it away. Build other people. Don't give it away for free. Don't work 40 hours a week. Don't do anything that crazy. But find places where you can use what you have and what you know to benefit other people. And the karma from that will absolutely come full circle. I've been really lucky to be able to do work that I'm passionate about. If the way I assessed my career was by money, if money were the objective and being wealthy is what would tell me I'm successful, then I am unsuccessful. I am never going to get rich doing what I do. But if I get to look back on a life well lived and being able to do things in the community and do work that had purpose and value, I've been very fortunate to be able to do that. And so you have to decide, if that success and dollar value success is really important to you, you're going to have to dial back on purpose a little bit, because that's what it takes to achieve in that realm a little bit more. I mean, that doesn't mean you can't have purpose. It just means you're going to prioritize one over the other. I prioritized purpose over finances, and I do fine, but I'm never going to get rich doing this, but that's kind of the difference there. So anyway, we are at time, so I'm happy to take a few questions if anyone has questions. And other than that, thank you so much for giving me a few minutes to share everything I learned the hard way.
All right. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Really appreciate the practical experience and the lessons learned and the motivations and guidance you've shared with us is very inspiring. Are there questions? Let's open it up if there are questions or comments.
I will ask a question. Cynthia, when you talk about like your experience with detractors, I think this is something, especially in our journey as female leaders, that's especially hard for us, because we want to figure out how to fix everything and get to the root cause and solve the problem. And I'm just interested to know, like, what were your learnings and what what worked for you and what gave you like that ability to have a healthy relationship with detractors?
Yeah. So part of it is to call your tribe and to get a core group of people who share what you believe and what you value. And it's also to look to approach it with some humility and look at it and say, okay, do they have a point? And if yes, then how do I work around that? And sometimes you just kick butt. So um, when I did my TEDx talk in 2019, I was nervous to do it because I was at my highest all-time weight. I was about 100 pounds more than I weigh right now. And I was very worried as a larger woman. Put yourself on a stage in front of 1,000 people. The people that were there in person were great. But when the talk came out on YouTube, the first comments on my TED talk were, if you want to save the planet, make this woman stop eating. And it only got uglier from there. And I sat in my office and I cried for 20 minutes as a 40-plus-year-old woman. And then I stopped and I said, you know what? I'm not letting them take this from me. And I called my tribe. And I went out every place in every social media group I'd ever participated and shared and provided value. And I said to them, hey, when you're trying to do something, so I'm in an entrepreneurs group, for example, with 200,000 people. And I said, hey, when you're trying to do something that hasn't been done before, people, there's a lot of detractors. How have you handled that? I just had this experience and I'm trying to come to terms with it. And I asked their advice. Of course, being social media, within 3 posts, they're like, where is this talk? We want to see it. And then once I had permission to post the talk, I posted the talk and said, don't engage the trolls, but if you want to watch it and leave a comment about the content, I don't care if you disagree with me, just, whatever. You guys, these are people that are just, I know, casually online, right? But we connected on something where we had all experienced that detractor. Anyway, the bottom line is I got the talk to 34,000 views in 24 hours. And all those nasty comments got pushed to the bottom and people saw it. If I hadn't had detractors that were beating up on me, I would never have called my tribe. And then look what happened because I did. So again, it kind of comes back to that. This is not how it's going to get done. And to step back and look at it and say, okay, what's a different way to move that same objective forward?
Thank you. I really appreciate that insight.
Okay, other questions?
This is Gwendoline. I have a question. I had some experiences that have just changed the way I approach things. And so I used to just go for things, just do it. And I'm much more reserved now, much more skeptical, much more leery. So what advice would you give me? I've got an idea. I want to implement it. I've had it for a while. I've got people encouraging me. I just can't take that first kind of step because
Yes.
I'm nervous about a lot of things, but failure is one. But there's a lot riding on it more than just creating something. It's also because of where I am emotionally and mentally, it's going to impact that aspect also.
Okay. So a couple things, stages and timing. You've got to decide, just because it's a great idea doesn't necessarily mean it's the right time. So the first thing you want to assess is it the right time, right? And we want to build the scaffolding under the idea. So what is the system that's going to take the project from start to finish? And I don't mean every aspect of the project. We're going to say, what is the very smallest piece of this I can chunk off and test in the real world? The very smallest piece.
Okay.
And to try to break that down. And then what is the structure that needs to underlie that? So if that piece is successful, I'll know what the next piece needs to be. And so, I showed you a dramatic story of big risk. The lesson I learned from that is way over the top and unnecessary to go at that big of a scale. Start small. It's okay. Take the pressure off yourself.
Okay.
And so that you can just say, okay, what's the kernel of that idea? And where can I plant it so it can grow? And how do I make sure I have the right things that can be brought, even if they're not there right now, just so I know where I'm going to get the water to water this idea? Who's going to help me weed the garden? All of those types of things. Just kind of having that peripherally there and having some kind of a system. So like I explained with that playground project, they'd done it 1,800 times before. So what's the accounting, the follow-up system that makes it more than an idea, that gives it that strength to withstand some of that buffering that it might get. And then again, just remember that people that do detract or whatever, that doesn't mean they don't want the idea to succeed. It means they just don't dare to believe in it. So don't worry about winning over your detractors. Do the best you can to minimize it, but find your tribe. Find your tribe, because none of us succeed alone.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We've got some comments in the chat if everyone wants to open their chat. And also in the chat, there's a little survey for you to fill out just to help us get some ideas for future sessions, what topics might be most interesting to you. And also we've had many people volunteer to give talks and be our keynote speaker at these Impact Ends. So if you're interested in doing that, or other inspirational speakers, we always appreciate getting suggestions. Any other questions before we close today? All right, we will wrap up, and thank you so much, Cynthia. That was very, very valuable, and enjoyed hearing about those experiences that you've had. And thanks everyone for attending, and we will see you again in the fall. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.